Hi guys, so today I'm gonna be doing a review of a foundation by Bourjois. I really like Bourjois, it's one of my very favorite drugstore brands, and I don't think I've done a review of any of the Bourjois products in quite some time, and I'm especially fond of their foundations. I have been meaning to, I just never got around to it, and I recently purchased quite a few foundations overall from drugstore, so expect more drugstore reviews coming soon. If you enjoy foundation reviews or any reviews for that matter, then please make sure to subscribe to my channel, and let's get started. The foundation that I will be testing today is Bourjois Air Mat. This foundation has been around for approximately 2 years, however it is still considered one of their newer releases. Obviously when it comes to foundations, I suspect that it's probably quite a long-winded process for companies to actually release these, because I'm sure that they have to go through a period of testing, and I suspect that there's probably quite a lot of research and work that goes into releasing a new foundation or any other product for that matter. The Bourjois Air Mat foundation currently retails for approximately £9.99. I suspect it's probably similar in euros. The foundation comes in a 30ml, so that's a standard size squeezy tube, so you basically just squeeze it out. I will obviously demonstrate that, and it comes in 5 shades. Now 5 shades is obviously not a particularly varied range of shades. The shade that I will be testing is number 2 vanilla, so number 2 is second lightest shade available in this particular foundation. Vanilla, I always go for vanilla whenever that is available, and from my experiences with Bourjois, they normally have a really nice yellow undertones in their foundations, so I think that probably vanilla would be the best shade for me. I am pale, but I'm not so pale. I'm not like porcelain pale, so I think that the lightest shade would be probably too light for me. According to Bourjois, this foundation is meant to stay on for up to 24 hours. It is a matte finish, so it is meant to give skin smooth and matte finish. It is a non-drying and lightweight formula. It apparently provides high coverage, which would be very much appreciated since there are not very many drugstore foundations with high coverage. To be fair, there's not very many high coverage foundations out there. Mostly I would say probably medium coverage, that's the standard coverage, or I come across a lot of light coverage but actually not so many of high coverage, so it would be nice to have a high coverage foundation from drugstore. It is enriched with mattifying micronized powders. It eliminates shine with no mask effect for undetectable result. I have researched the reviews, so the reviews from ordinary people who tested this foundation and obviously put their thoughts online or on the website. I took all of the reviews from the Boots website, and the reviews are very mixed. So they are so mixed that in fact there's almost as many positive reviews as negative. The overall star rating came to approximately 3.3 out of 5 stars, so that is definitely quite low. But it appears to me that the reviewers fell into one of two categories. They either absolutely loved it or they hated it. The positive features that stand out in those reviews are high coverage, longevity, so apparently the foundation lasts a really long time and in some cases is in near perfect condition at the end of the day, which I'm gonna test. It's apparently lightweight, especially for a mattifying foundation and high coverage foundation, and also some people really appreciate the yellow undertones in this particular foundation, or as I said previously, in general with Bourjois foundations. So to be quite honest with you, all of the praises that I have read fit into what Bourjois claimed that this foundation would do. So high coverage, lightweight, long lasting. Well, the yellow undertones, that's something that I've added, but we all very much appreciate that Bourjois. Among the people who were critical of this foundation, it seems that there were a few features that stood out. So first, a lot of people actually said that this foundation oxidizes to yellow or orange color. I had this issue with Clinique, the Perfecting foundation. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but I will see how it goes with this particular foundation. I never had this issue with other Bourjois foundations. It appears that while some people praise this foundation for being long lasting, on the other hand, some people actually felt that it wasn't long lasting at all, that it would become patchy within a few hours. I have read some complaints about skin becoming oily within a few hours. Some people also complain that there's not enough coverage. So again, some people say that there's plenty of coverage, and some people say it's not enough coverage. And also there were some complaints that this foundation dries fast, so presumably it's just difficult to blend it out, which I know from my past experiences with some foundations that yes, that can be quite annoying when the foundation dries on the skin really fast and you don't even have a chance to blend it out properly. As always, I will be testing this foundation with a brush on one side and a beauty blender on the other side of my face to see whether one or the other works better with this foundation. It comes in a sealed tube, which I very much appreciate because I know that no one has used this foundation, so I would really encourage other brands, not that any of them is actually watching this video, but I would really encourage them to do the same and just seal their products so that I know and other people, other customers know that this is perfectly hygienic and no one before us used the product. As you can see, this is a squeezy tube. This is the foundation, so it seems quite dense because the drop is not moving very fast. That's my drop test in terms of testing density of the foundation. Let's just apply it to my face. Okay, it is quite dense. I can straight away feel it. And let's just apply some more. I can straight away see that it's yellow. It smells very nice. It smells like perfume. I'd rather it didn't smell at all, but anyway, if it has to smell, at least it smells nice. And let's just get the brush. Looking at this, I mean, looking at what it's doing already, I'm just trying to get the hair out of my way. I am quite surprised that it seems to have a lot of coverage. It does say that it's meant to be high coverage, but honestly, I hear high coverage and it's almost never true, especially when it comes to drugstore foundations. So this is pretty interesting. You can see that it is quite yellow. I probably would have preferred it to be a little lighter, but the color selection isn't great, as I've mentioned. I mean, 5 shades by today's standard is not many, but you can definitely see the difference between my neck and this foundation. It is a little bit patchy. Let's just blend it out. I think that with the brush you can probably blend it out regardless, even if it's already dry on your face. So let's just do that. I wouldn't normally put foundation under my eyes, but it so happened that it just got into my under eye area. But anyway, let's see how it looks like at the end of today. I still have to blend this side out. So as you can see, I can honestly straight away say that blending is not that easy. It actually reminds me very much of Estee Lauder Camouflage. So that's Estee Lauder Double Wear Camouflage Foundation. This is probably the foundation with the most coverage I have ever tried, and it really reminds me of this foundation, which is a good thing in terms of coverage, but maybe not so good in terms of blending. Definitely see it in my eyebrows. Looking at my face, I mean, obviously the two sides of my face are not exactly identical, but you can definitely see all of the acne and acne scars on this side, whereas on this side it's still visible, but there's a huge difference definitely. So I am really impressed with the coverage. Well done, Bourjois, for the coverage level. However, it has taken me way longer than with any other foundation I can think of off the top of my head to blend this foundation out, and even then I am not 100% certain that my foundation is blended properly. The finish is definitely matte. It's definitely not so matte that you look like you have a ton of powder on your face, but it is definitely mattifying and you can definitely see that. Let's try to use Beauty Blender on the other side, although I think that that's probably gonna be a little bit more tricky. Let's get my hair out of the way. Okay, let's maybe not put, oh crap, my hair in it. My own fault, should have tied them up. I think maybe I put a little bit too much foundation on my face, but let's just give it a go and see how it blends with, I forgot the name, Beauty Blender. Yeah, that's the name. Very, very yellow, as you can see. But I am surprised to say this, it blends well, and I think maybe even better with the Beauty Blender than with the brush. And I thought that Beauty Blender would not be able to handle this foundation. Obviously the blender and the brush are overlapping in my nose area. I'm not gonna draw a straight line along the bridge of my nose to divide my face into two even parts. This is pretty interesting because I honestly thought that Beauty Blender was gonna be rubbish at blending this foundation, but I was wrong. It's better than the brush as far as I can see. Let's just try to make sure that the foundation did not gather anywhere, especially around my eyebrows and my hairline. I think enough blending. If I had to choose between the brush and the blender, I would definitely apply this foundation with blender. That's just my first impression. It appears that it blends out nicely and easily with the blender. It is definitely harder with the brush. There's definitely quite a lot of coverage considering this is a drugstore foundation. I didn't expect that, so I applaud Bourjois for putting this much coverage into their foundation. You can definitely still see like my acne scars and blemishes, etc. That's normal. I use concealer to cover these up. The shade is very yellow. It is a vanilla shade, so I have been expecting it to be a little bit on the yellow side, but I would say that it's definitely quite yellow. More yellow than I expected or would want it to be. You can definitely see the difference between my neck and my face, and I think it's actually a little bit too dark as well looking at it. Obviously if I needed to, I can always cover my neck as well, but that's just extra work. It is quite mattifying, but it is not so mattifying that my face looks like a mask, which is great, but I would say that it is a little bit patchy, so it appears that I can definitely see that there's less coverage in this area on my cheeks compared to the rest of my face. And this is why, for example, in certain areas you can still see a little bit of redness comparing to the other areas. And when you have a foundation that doesn't match your shade completely, that can be quite tricky because your foundation will basically show on your face because you literally have a contrast between your natural shade and the foundation shade. So I will have to work on that as well. It does unfortunately exaggerate the drier patches on my skin. That is probably because of the powder molecules that are included in this foundation, in this formula. And I can see that sadly, especially on my forehead. So when looking up close, I can see that the foundation got stuck on the drier patches of my skin. Now that's definitely not a desirable effect by any means, and that is something that would in the long run put me off using this foundation, because the foundation is just visible if it sticks to your dry patches or if it doesn't blend properly. Again, I think this is because of the powdery formula. So I will work with this foundation. I will definitely be testing it for a few weeks time, and hopefully I will find a way to actually wear it and make it completely invisible on my face. I will obviously be testing it today, so I will do a wear test. I'm planning on trying it for at least 8 hours, so I will see you guys in the evening, but other than that, obviously I will be testing it for a number of weeks, and then I will add a conclusion to this video. So I will see you now in the evening. Yes, so it has been about 9 hours now since I applied this foundation onto my face. Initially I was not very impressed, and 9 hours on I'm still not very impressed. So first, I think that the shade evened out throughout the day, which is great. So in the natural light it didn't look as yellow as it did in this really bright artificial lighting. However, I can definitely see that the foundation gathered literally in every single corner on my face that you can possibly find. So you can definitely see it here, not to mention here in my hairline. You can definitely see that there is something wrong there. And this section, my T-zone, has become really oily as well. Overall, the foundation is still on my face, but it's definitely not in perfect condition, nowhere near. This foundation probably would be best for people who really have no major skin issues. So for someone maybe with a normal skin type or even oily skin, because it's way easier to get rid of shine at the end of the day than revive dried patches of foundation on your face. But on the other hand, if you have really good skin, then why would you want a high coverage foundation really? I mean, obviously some people might, but high coverage foundations I think are normally for people with problematic skin, like my skin for example. So far I'm not really impressed, unfortunately, and I will obviously be testing this foundation for at least a few weeks. I will give it a go off camera, so perhaps it will work better with my normal everyday makeup. I didn't really apply much makeup today, almost none at all, but so far I'm really not very happy with this foundation. And I hate to say this because I really like Bourjois and I liked a lot of their foundations in the past, but the verdict is still out, so stay tuned. I mean, you're gonna see it in a moment, but I will be testing it for a few weeks time, and then I will end this video with the final conclusion. See you in a moment. And welcome back, guys. It has now been actually quite a few months since I shot my intro video. I have been using the Bourjois Air Mat foundation for I think over 3 months. I just haven't had a chance to actually shoot the conclusion to this review, and so I stuck to this foundation for as long as I had to. And now that I'm actually able to give you my final thoughts, I will discontinue the use of this foundation. There's very little left. In fact, if I wanted to finish it, probably it would be another few weeks of use because I've been using it for so long. But because I have been using it for so long, I think I have a pretty good idea of how this foundation works and how it works. And let me tell you that I am quite disappointed with this foundation. I am a big fan of Bourjois, of their foundations. I've always praised their foundations. I've tried a few of them and pretty much all of them worked really well. With this foundation, it's a whole other story, unfortunately. As always, there are some positives and there are some negatives. So first, when I initially applied this foundation, I felt that it looked really orange when it came out of the tube, and it really was. But somehow, literally once I've blended it out, it became lighter and it really matched my complexion. Usually when you apply foundation, it tends to go darker. With this foundation, it seems that it has gone lighter when I applied it to my face, which is actually great because it looked really orange when I first saw it. Let's put it this way, I felt for a moment that I might not be able to actually test this foundation because it just seemed so orange, and my face is definitely not orange, not even when it's that. It's just a completely different shade range when it comes to my complexion comparing to what I saw in this foundation. It does stay on for approximately, well, in my case, I've tested it for about 11 to 12 hours. It claims to stay on for 24 hours. I do not stay up for 24 hours. I go to bed eventually at the end of my day, so I didn't test that. However, even after, I would say probably 12 to 13 hours of wear, and since obviously I wore this foundation on an everyday basis, which means that I would wear it to work, I'm not quite sure if I liked how it wore. It's just that it was definitely still on my face when I got home, when I removed my makeup. So bear in mind that I would apply my makeup around 6 in the morning and I would remove it around 8 or 9 in the evening. So that's over 12 hours. Actually, it's more about like 14 or maybe even more sometimes. And the foundation would still be there. I could definitely see it on the cotton pad when I was removing my makeup, but it definitely didn't look the way I would like it to look. It's a mattifying foundation, and I am quite reserved when it comes to mattifying foundations because I just don't ever find them looking natural. Even though I have an oily T-zone, I prefer to just use a dewy foundation and then maybe apply some powder on top of it. With this foundation wore okayish for a few hours, and then it would progressively become more cakey, more dry. I had a sense that it sort of separated on my face, so it seems that there were some powdery particles which started to stick together, and so it basically looked as if I applied foundation and on top of that I applied a powder. So this is basically how this foundation looked. It looked like a mixture of powder and a mixture of foundation, which apparently is actually a part of a formula of this foundation. I didn't really dig very deep into that, so I don't know what that exactly means, but it does say, I believe, on Maybelline's website or one of those websites where you can buy Maybelline, that there are some powder particles in this foundation. And so throughout the day I had a sense that the dry areas of my face became drier or looked drier, and the oily areas of my face became more oily, which is normal, but then on top of that I had this layer of this powdery foundation that just didn't look very nice. So even though it stayed on for a long time, I admit that it stayed on for a long time, it just really didn't look very nice. On top of this, even though, as I've previously mentioned, I'm not a huge fan of mattifying foundations, this foundation didn't even mattify that much. So it seems that it did mattify the areas that were already sort of matte, so the areas of my face where my skin is kind of normal because I have combination skin, so my T-zone tends to be oily whereas the rest of my face is kind of normal. My nose and my T-zone, they were never matte with this foundation. Now I do apply moisturizer and an oil in the morning before I apply foundation, but I'm assuming that this foundation is meant for oily skin, so my skin, once I've applied the moisturizer and the oil, it doesn't actually look any more oily than it would have without those two. So I would still have to use powder, especially in my T-zone, which is fine, but it's just kind of like, what's the point of calling this mattifying foundation when it really doesn't mattify all that much, or at least it doesn't mattify enough for me to really see that my skin is mattified. So yeah, I would still use powder, and really mattifying powder, my Maybelline Stay Matte powder, I think that's the name of it, and that is a really mattifying powder. So overall it's a mattifying foundation, but it really didn't do very much for my oily T-zone. It mattified the areas that are not very oily. So in the reviews that I've read, some people mentioned that this foundation is full coverage, and I would say no. It's definitely not full coverage. I have not attempted to apply 2 layers of this foundation just because it would become quite cakey at the end of my day anyway, even with 1 layer, and I wonder what would have happened if I applied 2. Maybe I should have actually tested it for the purpose of this video, but it's definitely not a full coverage foundation. I guess if you do not have blemishes or any areas that you actually need full coverage for, it might seem like full coverage because it does even out skin tone, although the description says that it's lightweight formula formula. I'd say that I felt that it wasn't actually all that lightweight. I, for the most part, used it with my fingers. So I ditched the brush, I ditched the sponge, I just applied it with my fingers, and even my fingers could barely handle the density of this foundation. It's not very thick, but I wouldn't call it light coverage. To me, it's a mixture of foundation with powder, which is always going to be thicker. I have Bourjois Healthy Mix Serum Foundation, and that is a lightweight formula. I wouldn't call this a lightweight formula. Another thing that I've noticed as a person with large pores, especially in my T-zone, I could definitely see that it sinks into my pores. It does so pretty much immediately after the application, so I didn't really have to give it that much time for this to happen. And let's face it, that's definitely not the look I'm looking for. I mean, you know, you don't really see it unless you look up close, but if I had a choice, I would rather just have a foundation that doesn't sink into my pores and doesn't exaggerate my pores. Overall, I guess I'm just not very impressed with this foundation. I would call it an average drugstore foundation. The average star rating based on the reviews that I've read was approximately 3.3, and I would agree with that. I would give it around 3 to 3.5 stars. Even though most of the points I have made were not positive about this foundation. This foundation is, in my view, just an average drugstore foundation. I've used foundations like this in the past. I've used them since I was a teenager. This was one of those foundations that I would use when I was in high school, and I didn't really know that much about makeup back then, so to me that was normal for a foundation to look this way, and that was absolutely fine. So now, after testing loads of different high-end drugstore foundations, probably I have a different perspective on things, and that's why I might be a little bit more harsh with foundations. But overall, in my view, this is just an average drugstore foundation. If this was a high-end foundation, then to me it would have landed at probably about 2 stars, but it's not a high-end foundation. It is way less expensive, and so I guess the expectations have to match the price as well. Although I didn't particularly like this foundation, as I said, I have been using it for, I would probably say, over 3 months now. I can't even remember when I shot the intro video, and I'm fine. I wear it on an everyday basis, and I'm kind of thinking that maybe I should just stick to it for a little while and finish it off completely, because there's really not that much left. And as I said, even though it doesn't really provide me with the finish that I would like very much, or I would be impressed with, it's just an average drugstore foundation. If you don't have very high expectations, the price is not too high, and you know, I am a grown woman and I still managed to survive going to work wearing this foundation, and I didn't look tragically bad. I looked okay enough for me to stick to it for a number of months. This is it, guys. I do hope that you found this video helpful, and if you did, then please give it a thumbs up. I would really appreciate if you would subscribe to my channel if you enjoy review videos. I have a bunch of other makeup reviews coming up, so stay tuned for that, and I very much hope to see you in my next video. Have a good one, guys. Bye!